Welcome to the session, Exploring Strategies for Analyzing Primary Sources. If you would, please go ahead and use the QR code or the bit.ly for attendance for our session today. And welcome, everybody. Welcome as you are signing in. Please use the QR code or the bit.ly for attendance. While that is occurring, I do want to give you a little structure for our time together in this learning. We will be using QR codes and bit.lys throughout the session. So if you have the QR code app, or if not, maybe you can get it right now if that's something you want to do, or you can use the bit.lys. And the bit.lys, I will be showing you those, and we'll be going to those sites and resources throughout the session today. And you can also write them down for when you have time after the session to review all of the resources. However, at the end, I will be sharing with you an additional QR code or bit.ly that will link you to a Wakelet, which provides all of the resources that we will be using here today for the session. And if you are not familiar with a Wakelet is what I consider a digital filing cabinet. So all of the resources will be available there at the end of the session, again, either via a QR code or through a bit.ly. Okay, we are going to go ahead and begin. I do hope you have had a chance to sign in. If not, there will be another chance throughout the session here in the beginning for you to do so. Okay. We are here today for exploring strategies for analyzing primary sources. My name is Erica Lowry, and I am an ICS educator. And as you can see on there, that's Institute for Curriculum Services. So hello. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and minimize myself because you do not need to be watching me throughout this session. It is about the resources that are on the screen. And I don't want my picture hiding any of the resources around the during the session. So again, here is another opportunity for you to sign in if you were not able to before. Maybe you were getting the QR code app or you are still setting up. And of course, you can use the bit.ly as well. A little bit about ICS. The mission for the Institute for Curriculum Services is dedicated to improving the quality of K-12 education on Jews, Judaism, Jewish history, and Israel in the United States. We do this by developing standards-aligned curricula and offering professional development to teachers around the country. We believe an excellent education is essential to building a strong civil society where all people can flourish. As you can see in the top corner of your screen, ICS is a nonprofit education initiative. And then in the bottom corner of your screen, you can see ICS is a consortium member of the Library of Congress of Teaching with Primary Sources program. We are proud of this distinction, for which we had to go through a rigorous process, and it highlights our commitment to ensuring our materials are rooted in primary sources to help students think critically and independently when making meaning about historical and current events. Okay, so last time, I believe, if you have not been able to sign in yet, please go ahead and use the bit.ly there or the QR code that is on your screen. All right. And continuing on about ICS and what we offer, this graphic shows the variety of content area and educator enrichment topics we offer through our no-cost resources and professional development. We're pleased to offer many content-driven topics, as well as 2 sessions exclusively for teachers enrichment, such as this one on analyzing primary sources. Our content is broadly applicable across many courses, giving teachers the confidence they need when addressing complicated and at times controversial topics with their students. Our session objectives for the learning today are to understand what primary sources are and their importance, uncover resources and digital tools from the Library of Congress, National Archives, and other sites that offer support for teaching with primary sources, and participate in activities that model analyzing a variety of primary sources in engaging ways. And for you at the end to receive access to ready-to-use resources, as I had stated before with the Wakelet, which again is like a digital filing cabinet. That's how you will receive all of those resources. Okay, we will begin. Let's take a mind walk. And this is an activity that you can do with your students. And there is a QR code, as I stated. We'll be using these throughout the session, as well as a link. So if you would, please go ahead and use that QR code or type in that Padlet. Right? Or since this is asynchronous, you can just watch. Of course, this is a little bit different than if we were live and participating together. So some of these steps, since we're not able to interact, I am going to go through with you, not as if we were interacting, but to show you all those steps, because you can use this learning tool, this Padlet, and this taking a mind walk with your students in class. So it is important for us to walk through with it. Okay, so list all of the activities you have done in the last 24 hours. And I'll give you about 10 seconds to think of that, or you can use your writing utensil or whatever device you have with you, and you can go ahead and write those down. Okay, what evidence, if any, would these activities have left behind as proof that they actually happened? So some of the things that I wrote down was I went to Office Depot and bought something. I watched a movie on, I think it was Peacock. I went to work. So what evidence would these activities have left? Well, I would have a receipt from Office Depot. Maybe somewhere in the digital world, there's proof that I watched this movie that was on Peacock. And of course, me using my badge or my key card to get into work, that would leave a record that I was there. So number 3, of that evidence left behind from those activities, what might be preserved for the future? I don't think any of those things that I mentioned would be preserved for the future. I mean, I guess as far as the digital world is concerned, everything is preserved, and a receipt, maybe a timestamp on a movie and a timestamp on me entering and exiting the building could be preserved. And with those, what would a future historian be able to tell about your life and or your society in which you live based on the evidence from your daily activities? So looking back at what you wrote down in number 1, okay, what would a future historian be able to tell? And then number 5, what do you think makes something a primary source? What do you think makes something a primary source? Okay. Now, going back to our session, how can this activity help your students understand the value or functionality of primary sources? So again, if we were in a live session, we'd be using this as a time for you to unmute and answer the question, or answering the question in the chat, but of course that is not possible. So if you would go ahead and just think of that to yourself. Or if you happen to be taking this session with someone next to you, you can chat, you can pause and chat about that. Okay, primary versus secondary. This very brief video clip from the Library of Congress will build on your responses to what makes something a primary source that we just did with question 5 in the Padlet. In the in the mind walk activity, and also introduces us to secondary sources. It would be good to show this to your students as you begin the conversation about primary sources in your classroom.
From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
What exactly is a primary source? Primary sources are the raw materials of history, original documents and objects which were created at the time under study. Examining primary sources gives one a powerful sense of history and the complexity of the past. Analyzing primary sources guides one towards higher order thinking and developing better critical thinking and analysis skills. Now, what is a secondary source?
And we will get to that in a moment, talking about secondary sources. Okay, so primary sources, as you can read on the screen, okay, the Library of Congress shares this definition, are the raw materials of history and original documents and objects that were created at the time under study. They are different than secondary sources or accounts that retell, analyze, or interpret. And this video can be found at the Library of Congress. This video will be available to you in the Wakelet and would be something good to share with your students when you are starting to help them understand or regain an understanding of the difference between the two. Okay, what the research says, Britannica Digital Learning, formerly Encyclopedia Britannica, recently published an article about the importance of including primary sources in its instruction. And you can see that down at the bottom corner of it, but again, it's going to be in the Wakelet. And it states that research and education stresses that the use of primary sources in K-12 classrooms has many learning benefits, such as expanding students' world knowledge, and offers opportunities for interdisciplinary learning, increased student engagement, and it helps develop critical thinking skills. If you would take a moment and think to yourself, what other learning benefits do you think teaching with primary sources offers students? We've talked about what primary and secondary sources are. Now let's think of examples of each. Let's discuss. What do you think are some examples of primary sources? Please write them down if on a device or whatever writing mechanism you have in front of you, or you may think to yourself, since this is an asynchronous session. Some things you may have thought about or written down are speeches, songs, photographs, newspapers, letters, interviews, journals, patents, birth certificates, property deeds, audiovisual recordings. All of those are examples of primary sources. Go ahead and do the same thing with examples of secondary sources. Either write them down or think to them in your head. What are some examples of secondary sources? Okay, some examples that you might have written down are textbooks, biographies, reviews, compilation, abstracts, encyclopedias, dictionaries, atlases, secondhand accounts in audio or visual style, okay, interpretation of things. Okay, so here, okay, these are the kinds of sources that can be used in different subjects. Okay? That while learning about important historical events as well as current events that can take place in all classes, the challenge is ensuring that students can identify the difference between what is a primary source and what is a secondary source. Students need to practice. And an example of why they need to practice, because sometimes the lines could be blurred for students as they are learning this skill. It is often difficult to distinguish clearly between primary and secondary sources. Some evidence can be both at the same time. Consider that the first edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica was a secondary source when first published in 1768, but today it is a primary source to historians. Practice and explanation is important for students in order to gain a foundation for this. The Library of Congress offers teachers a treasure trove of resources for teaching with primary sources, especially if you are looking for information on global historical topics during the 19th century through the earliest 20th century. Just an interesting sidebar that the Library of Congress, some history about it, in January 1802, President Thomas Jefferson approves a Compromise Act of Congress, which states that the President of the United States will appoint the Librarian of Congress. And then by 1812, the first classified library catalog is published. And it wasn't until 1994 that the library began digitizing its collection. We are going to take this next part of our session and we are going to explore those different 1, 2, 3, 4, those different resources, and then we'll come back to 5. We are going to go explore them, and then of course you will be able to do this more on your own because this link, this resource is in your Wakelet. Okay, going to the Library of Congress. Okay, you can see that. And then here is about this program. Oops, sorry about that. I do apologize. I didn't click one more click. All right, so here is about this program. So now we're in the Library of Congress site, and this tells you exactly what it says about this program. I am scrolling, so if that gives you a headache, please go ahead and close your eyes for a moment. And again, you'll be able to explore this more on your own if you are not familiar with this part of what the Library of Congress offers. Then you can go ahead, getting started with primary sources. Right? It gives you step by step. If working with primary sources is not a strong suit or something you are beginning possibly as a new teacher or something that your state now mandates, or because you want to introduce more primary resources to your students, the LOC does give you a step by step and things to think about and consider throughout the entire process. So again, I'm scrolling through this, not very fast, but if you do get a headache, please go ahead and look away or close your eyes. Okay. And the big rocks of this process are in that bold, larger font or larger type throughout this. It gives you questions to ask yourself, questions to ask your students, and again, things for you to consider. It also has plenty of classroom materials. So not only in that previous page, okay, getting started with primary sources, but then gives you those primary source materials to use. And one of my favorites is these primary source sets. And I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And what these sets is, it's not just text. It gives you a set possibly, and we'll just read Lincoln right here: speeches, correspondence, campaign materials, a map. If it was prominent in this, they would have included a recording. If it was there, obviously you can see the picture of him, the visual is there. So for those who are ELA, you may be familiar with the term text set. So this is a primary source set. So it's not just text. Like you can see here in the Abraham Lincoln, it does have the map and the campaign materials. Just scrolling down one more to Alexander Hamilton and looking at this: manuscript, images, historic newspapers. So it is that full set that you can use with your students. Either everybody individually has them, or you can break them up into station rotations in your classroom and have the students look at them that way. And then, of course, just like this is professional development in analyzing primary sources, the LOC does give you some online options as well to further or have an extension in your knowledge and application of this process in using primary and secondary sources in your classroom. So again, I'm scrolling. And you can see there's a variety from in-person to videos to finding a partner. And then they're always available, as you can see, with their online office hours for you to ask questions. And so are we. If you would like to contact me after this, or are you planning on implementing this, please, by all means, I am a resource to you as well. Okay, I am going to go back to that thing link. That's right here. And again, ThingLink, it's a resource that will be in that Wakelet. If you are not familiar with it, it allows you to take a visual, just like I have here, a screenshot of the page of the Library of Congress, and it allows you to put and plot certain points and then link those to the resource that you want to go to, where it is. You'll see this in one of our other sessions. We've done this. We've created a museum and or a gallery walk actually inside the building using this process, using a ThingLink. Okay, the last thing I want to make sure that you know that is available to you is this, okay? Enhance your search through Google. So looking for primary sources, your students may just want to Google and then whatever comes up. But we want them to be more researchers, having that eye to critical thinking and really understanding where their resources are coming from. So you can give them this tool for you as well as them, is using that site:/loc.gov. And I'm going to highlight it here on the screen. Okay, and what it does is it allows you to put in any subject area that, or the subject area that you are learning about, that the students are learning about, that they're trying to find information about, and it will just give you information about that. It'll just give you information about what the Library of Congress has about that topic. So it is not just a random Google search, it is specifically searching the loc.gov for that information. So let's see, we can put in civil rights. Okay. And then I click on that, and this is everything that the Library of Congress has. Featured content, collection items. If they have certain types of resources that you've indicated for them that they need to look for, dates, okay. Articles, essays. Okay, so quite a valuable resource for you and your students. Okay, we are going to be going back to the original, okay, the session slides here. All right, so exploring the Library of Congress source analysis tools. So it not only gives you the instruction, about this program, getting started, things for you to consider, your professional development, it does give you tools to use in your classroom for activities or analysis tools, as well as giving you the actual documents. So you can, on the teacher guides, and this is very specific, analyzing primary sources. I mean, this is a screenshot from the LOC. And then you can see over here, they give you fillable PDFs for online accessibility. So both you and your students have a choice to whether you would like them to, whether you, the teacher, would like to print it out, make copies and have your students write, or if you would like to have them to complete it digitally. So I am going to take a moment to click on some things here. I like analyzing photographs and prints. Okay, so again, here is that primary source tool. And you can see this is how they can fill it in digitally, or you can print and copy it as the teacher. I'm going to go back here real quick. Click on the analyzing photographs again. This is exactly what you just saw here. Okay, and then here's your teacher's guide. Okay, to gather you through the observe, reflect, question, which as you can see is circular here. It is not linear. You go, they observe, they question, they reflect, they reflect. It is an ongoing process. And then here are some samples or some questions that you can ask your students. And then further investigation. I'm also a maps person. I do love maps, former geographer. Okay, and so it has the questions and further investigation activities that you can do with your students there, all in the teacher's guide. All right, let's practice. So again, this is something for you to do on your own. If we were in a synchronous session, we would be doing this together through you unmuting or you participating in the chat. But this is to give you time to just go through an activity that you would do with your students using that Library of Congress tool, observe, reflect, and question. Okay, so what do you, using this image, what can you observe? And again, we want to focus on observations. So once you think of something, go back and ask yourself, is that an inference or an observation? Okay, and then reflect. What inferences can you make from this poster? Here is where you make those inferences, what you think the poster is trying to show you. And then that last part, question. What questions does this make you think about? What does it make you wonder? So again, not only you, but your students as well, this practice allows them to make all the self-identification, do that critical thinking, having that eye, that critical eye that you want them to have, because you are not asking them questions. They're generating those questions of what makes them think about. What does it make them wonder? What do they infer? What do they see or observe? Okay, so you may do something like putting this up on the screen, and then you would have your students, you could give this to them, use these as their guiding questions. You can say these verbally to them, or again, have them up on the screen, or both, whichever is most appropriate for your students. And then reflect. Okay, and then reflect. Now remember, there is the digital PDF, or again, you can print and make copies of it, that students can be recording their responses to their observe, to their reflect as you are going through this. Whereas you do not have that PDF, and this is asynchronous, and I'm asking you to just think for yourself. I don't know if you're writing it down, but you can have that opportunity excuse me, for your students to write it down, because there is that PDF that the LOC provides for you. Okay, and then of course, observe. And then there is that extension part, or further investigation part. Just a little bit about this poster. It was sponsored by the Jewish Relief Campaign. This World War I poster features a monumental female figure offering the bounty of America, a tray laden with food, to Europe's destitute women and children. The skyline of New York City and the Statue of Liberty are in the background. Between 1914 and 1924, American Jews raised an unprecedented $63 million for relief for their suffering European kinfolk. All right, political cartoons are an excellent way for students to think critically about a current event or historical event. Typically, they are interpretive drawings, sometimes with words that convey an idea, message, or an opinion of the event. They typically include most, if not all, of these characteristics that you see up on the screen. I'm going to go ahead and click here. Okay, so this is an activity. Again, this is in your Wakelet. You can use this with your students. We are not going to be able to do that here because we are asynchronous, but I am going to go through it with you. So you would have this, so your students' answers would be recorded. And then this is a political cartoon analysis tool, being digital. You know, who knows in this world if you have to be on virtual with your students, this is an excellent resource, or maybe it's just something that you want them to do in class so they can record their answers digitally. Or if you want, you could easily turn this into let's just say analog or paper and pen type activity. So what do you see using that observe, looking at this picture? And then what words do you see, giving them another picture? And who do you think this man represents? And yes, I do need to scroll up so you won't be able to see the picture as I go to this next question. And what do you want to know about the man? And so you and your students would record all of the answers. Of course, not correct answers, because this is what they are observing and inferencing. Described how the men are dressed. What do you think those men are talking about? What would you ask the men? All right, and then you see here, this is the full picture. So we took that very focused lens. Some of you might know this activity, the quadrant activity, where you have just a corner square or rectangle of a landscape paper cut out. And so you have 3/4 of the paper still there, and you only look at one part of the picture at a time to really focus on it. This is a digital form of that. Right? And then they put it all together, okay? Because they've already had their thoughts, and now they're just synthesizing them and putting them all together now that they're seeing the full picture. Okay. All right, and then of course, it's very important for us to be rooted in our primary sources, so we give that information as well at the end of this. All right, so switching over to the National Archives. So all of that was Library of Congress, and now we're switching over to the National Archives. Like the Library of Congress, the National Archives and Records Administration, the NARA, is a record keeper, but it's more narrowly focused, containing historical resources only relating to American history. Just like the LOC, the National Archives also has educator resources rooted in primary sources, along with their own set of source analysis tools. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it, and we're going to go to that site. Okay. So you can see here the educator resources. Okay, research our records, veteran service records, educator resources here, America's founding documents. One thing I want to point out to you, okay, I'm going to scroll again. They have their own set of continuous professional development enrichment if you would like to do more past this session here today. Okay, and again, we'll get to this in a moment, working with primary sources as far as their analysis tools. I do want to point this out, Docs Teach. So we're just going to go to create fun and engaging activities. You can sign in and make your own archive as a teacher. So one of the more visually powerful, of course, your students could all be different, but what we've used with my students and with other teachers during this session as well, one of the most visually powerful is using this balance scale. Now, unfortunately, it's not digital, so it doesn't actually move, but students can take documents, take two sides of an issue. Let's see if it can go on here. Okay, it takes two sides of an issue, and you have one side over here and the other side of the issue over here, and they use the documents and they place them on the scale according to what their analysis shows them which side it supports. So again, it doesn't weigh like a balance, get heavier on one side than the other. If you know how to do that digitally, fantastic. Please do, and then share back with me. But they then can see what the documents, what the primary sources, secondary sources, what they support, which side of the issue. And absolutely, you can have different groups in your classroom using the same scale, the same documents, the same issues, and they could place the documents in the different places along that spectrum, whether it completely supports that issue or that question that you asked them, or if it's in the middle, or of course, then if it's on the other side, completely supports the other issue. That has always been a fan favorite, if you will, in the classroom. Okay, so that digital zoom crop, that's very similar, same kind of concept to what we just did. Okay. You can see all these different tools that it has for you. And I'm just scrolling slowly, so you can get a glimpse of them all prior to you giving your own time and going into each of them, because we are not going to do that here. You decide what is best for you and your students. Okay, and here's that one that I discussed, weighing the evidence. We'll just click on that. You can see it already gives you learning objectives for your classroom, how to actually create this activity. Excuse me. Okay, what to do. See, digitally, leaving them blank for the students or you putting into opposing interpretation. Gives you some teaching tips. Okay, so that is one of the good things that about the NARA and the Library of Congress, that just me speaking as an educator, is that it doesn't let me try to figure out what the Library of Congress and NARA were thinking. Like they're like, here, this is what we're thinking. These are some questions to consider. Here are some tools. Here's how we think that they could be used the best. Obviously, they've done their own research and pedagogy on it. So they really are successful as learning tools and learning strategies in the classroom. Whoop. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so here is the National Archives, their written document, their analysis tool. First, they want you to meet the document. And of course, this is on that website that we just went to, okay, that you can get, where you can either fill it in digitally or print it out and have students write on it with pen or pencil. So they want the students to meet the document, really understand what type of document it is, and then describe it to someone who can't see it. So that really makes them understand what type of primary source or secondary source they are working with. And then, of course, observe its other parts, which is very familiar to what the Library of Congress was asking you when observing. And then try to make sense of it. And it gives them some guiding questions there. And then use it as historical evidence. Okay, so this is something I'd just like you to do an example for yourself. Okay, do an example for yourself. So looking at this, meet this document that I just put up on this screen. What is it? Obviously, it's a telegram. You're an intelligent adult, you know that. You can see telegram is on there. So you would go ahead and check that. And then you would, going through the NARA tool, you would then describe it to someone who can't see this. You tell them there's stamps all over it. There seems to be signatures all over it. Top secret is in what, three different places on it, possibly more. And then you observe its different parts. And of course, this would be very foreign to students doing this. It's a telegram. Just that word, you may have to explain to them what a telegram is. Do we still have them, or was? And then trying to make sense of it. And then using it as historical evidence. So, of course, you would want to model this with your students, go through a primary or secondary source with them before you ask them to do this on their own. All right, we mentioned earlier that using primary sources helps students to think critically and deeper about topics than if they were just reading a summary. One way to do that is to incorporate thinking routines when analyzing primary sources. And as it says, excuse me, on the screen, using thinking routines cultivates a community of thinkers with a culture of thinking, supporting learners in becoming intentional in their shared pursuit of deep understanding. Okay. And can you think of topics that you teach where students can look at the event, issue, or time period through different perspectives? Okay. Again, my question to you is, can you think of topics that you teach where students can look at the event, the issue, or the time period through different perspectives? Right. Using primary sources can help students think critically and deeper about topics than if they were just reading a summary. Okay, you can see two strategies here: see, think, wonder, and think, pair, share. Okay, these are two strategies that you can use, or you probably or possibly already are using in your classroom with your students to help promote that critical thinking. ICS has also developed activities to help students think like historians, but in a more modern, relatable approach. You can see we have the Twitter activity up here. You can change it into Instagram. In the news, source analysis activity. So first, there would be the background or the foundational of what is news or where do they get their news, even possibly introducing them to a newspaper. and having them use this activity to then do a news report. So if they were to create a video or a TikTok rather quickly in an educational format, I'm not promoting using TikTok. I'm just saying trying to use a video app that they might be familiar with, and in a 60-second news report that covers the key ideas in this handout. And again, you will be able to find these in the Wakelet that we will provide for you at the end of this session. Okay, and making worksheets work for you. Okay, if you're not familiar with Soapstone Graphic Organizer, I mean, worksheet is not a bad term. Worksheet, handout, they need something to write on and they need something to work on. So then it turns into a worksheet. Or how about it's a graphic organizer? It's a analytical tool that students can use. Sorry, that was my soapbox teacher coming out of me, and not that because not just using soapbox because this is Soapstone Graphic Organizer. It's just what I said. It's an excellent way to gauge your students' understanding of the sources you're studying, especially a wonderful tool when analyzing the tone of a document to determine the attitude of the author, if there are any biases, and the type of literary elements that are highlighted in the document. To make things more accessible for your students, you can transform this graphic organizer like this into a digital version using Google Forms, Microsoft Forms, SurveyMonkey, or any other editable PDF software you might have available to you. And again, it's just to give you that choice. You, the teacher, can decide whether you are going to allow the students to decide how they want to show the work to you. Okay, and here we are at the end of our session, the Wakelet that I keep referring to that we are going to give you, and now here we are giving it to you. Here's the QR code, or you can use the site address that is below it to access those ready-to-use resources that were in our session objectives slide at the beginning. I am going to click on this. So if you do not have a QR code, I'm about to click on this and get off this screen. So if you need to write down the site address, please go ahead and do so, because I am about to click on this QR code and go to the Wakelet. I guess I didn't do that. Hold on, let me go back. There we go. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so there we go, Wakelet. Okay. Excuse me. And again, I'm scrolling, but I am scrolling slowly. And you now have access to this. Okay. It's our website, Staying Connected. The Mind Walk, using Padlet if you have not used that before, if you have used it before and you want to return. The Library of Congress thing link, because again, that's something you can use with your students. The teacher's guide for you to get started with it. There's the Jewish Relief Campaign poster. There is the fillable PDF. And here's Zoom into primary source analysis, the tech tool, how to use it. Here's a little bit about other sessions, the Arab-Israeli conflict Summer Institute that we have, and online session. Still scrolling down, there's that Telegram that I said that would be available to you, as well as the meeting the document from the NARA. Still scrolling, and there's those two critical thinking strategies. And then, of course, our online activities. And there we go. Okay, and then some other things about us. Oh, not home buying. Okay, so I'm going to scroll up rather quickly. Okay, and go back, and in case you did not receive that site address, there you go, or the QR code. And before you click off or stop this video, I would like you to take a moment and please use, again, another QR code or bit.ly, and please fill in the session evaluation form. I absolutely read every single one of your responses. I always want to improve not only myself, but the session as well. So please go ahead and use that QR code or that bit.ly, which will take you to a Google form for the session evaluation. And I'm going to put myself back on screen here real quick. Hi. So again, I don't know where that's going to end up on your screen. I have it in the middle, but thank you for spending your time learning with me about analyzing primary sources. And hopefully this is very helpful to you and your students, possibly tomorrow, possibly next week, and of course, whenever you are using primary and secondary sources. So again, my name is Erica Lowry. Please go ahead and use that QR code and that bit.ly to take the survey for the session evaluation. And last but not least, thank you again. Thank you again. Bye-bye.